This is the new Samsung Galaxy Book5 Pro, a slim and powerful laptop that I've been using very heavily to figure out if I can switch to this from my MacBook Pro. So this is not only a review of the Galaxy Book5 Pro, but also attempting to answer the question of, will I make this my everyday laptop? I mean, it's a nice looking laptop, seems a lot like a MacBook. There's a lot that I like about it, but full disclosure here, this video was not sponsored. This was not gifted to me. This is a loaner from Samsung, so I'm sending it back after the video, but they have no editorial privileges, so I'm obviously covering both pros and cons in this video. Now let's start off with the hardware there. Like I said, this looks a lot like a MacBook, all aluminum, comes in two different colors, gray or silver. I was shocked at how slim this actually is when I took it out of the box. So I'm a huge fan of the design. And as you can see on the side, there's also kind of an illusion of being even thinner than it is with how it tapers and has the chamfer on the bottom. It's also not a 360 laptop. There's also a Galaxy Book5 360. I think this is better because one, I literally never flip my laptop all the way into 360. Like, I think that's kind of useless. And two, it just feels more premium, more solid. You get a thinner laptop, and the hinge just, I think, is so much better on this. So opening it up, you can see there's essentially basically no screen wobble at all, which I'm very impressed by. And if we do the one finger test, as long as you have some amount of friction on the table, like it's not a super glossy surface, it's pretty easy. Like, it opens with one finger, closes with one finger. I think that's pretty solid. When you open it up, you can sign in using the fingerprint sensor, which is the power button on the top right. It's very fast, very responsive, but you do not have any kind of face recognition using Windows Hello on the camera on the top. And I'll talk about the camera in a minute. It's incredibly small, which gives you some very thin bezels all the way around. They're not perfectly symmetric, so the sides are thinner than the top. The bottom is the largest, but I'm okay with having a larger bezel on the bottom. It kind of keeps the screen a little bit higher towards a more viewable angle, in my opinion. Speaking of the display, that is mostly a highlight of this, but there is one drawback with the display. What I like about it, it's 120 Hz Dynamic AMOLED 2X display, comes in 14 or 16-inch versions. This one is the 16-inch. Honestly, I much prefer 14-inch laptops. I think having the best tech in the smallest package is always really nice, but hey, 16 inches gives you a lot of real estate to work with. It's a touchscreen, which is very responsive, and I mean, the color on here is fantastic. It's really a great display, but the unfortunate part, as somebody who films videos in 4K and I edit and review videos in 4K, this display is only a 3K display. So for a lot of media that you're watching or games or whatever, it's gonna be solid. But if you're editing videos or you know, a content creator, that's a little bit of a drawback in my opinion. This is a 16 by 10 display, which I think is nice, a little bit taller, gives you some more real estate when you are, you know, reading web pages or whatever. But if you're watching media that's, you know, 16 by 9 or even slimmer than that, you're gonna have a larger black bar on the top and the bottom. This display is also anti-reflective, which, I mean, using the studio lights here, I can really see the difference. I'll show you some B-roll of this. I think that is incredibly impressive. We've seen similar technology on the Galaxy S24 Ultra, for example, and I think that's really, really nice to have on here. Also, the entire body, being aluminum, is really quite fingerprint resistant. And stepping away from the specs to a more personal note here, coming from a MacBook to use this, the touchscreen is something that I don't miss when I'm using a Mac, but when I'm not using a Mac, I realize just how useful that actually is. Not just if you're like signing documents or drawing or whatever, but simply just like you don't know where your mouse is, you just poke anywhere on the screen and you can navigate. And I think that's really such a big advantage here. And especially, even though this is not a 360 laptop, still having a touchscreen, I think is pretty solid. The keyboard then, I think we need to talk about that a little bit. Again, things I like and things I don't like about this. Things I don't like, there's very, very shallow key travel. I think it's similar-ish to a MacBook in the key travel distance, but this one feels a little bit, I don't want to say mushier, but just it's harder to type fast and smooth. So I'm not somebody who is really picky about keyboards. Typically, I say I like a lot of keyboards and then other people don't really like them as much as I do, but this is a keyboard that I kind of actually dislike a little bit. There are several different levels of the keyboard backlight, which I think is really quite nice. It's a nice looking keyboard as well, and I'm happy that there is a numpad on the right side. However, the numpad feels a little bit cramped, especially on a 16-inch laptop. I thought we'd have a slightly larger numpad there. However, the advantage of that, if you're looking for a bright side here, is that if you're typing out a password or something, it's pretty easy to reach over with like your pinky and hit those numbers. It's kind of an unexpected benefit that I just kind of started doing as I used this laptop. As far as the trackpad goes, it's absolutely huge. I think that is really quite nice that you have a lot of space with this. It works very well, you know, solid clicky sound, but it's not a haptic trackpad, which again is something that if you've never had a haptic trackpad, you're gonna be like, who cares? Why do you want that? But if you have had one, like the MacBooks all do have, it is really nice. It feels more satisfying in my opinion. It's also not like a really loud click all the time on the MacBook. So I don't know. That one is kind of a drawback. When you factor in the price of this, I think having a haptic trackpad would be something that I would like to see here. Now let's talk about the ports on this laptop. If you look at the right side, we have a 3.5mm port, headphone, microphone, whatever. We have a USB type A, which is awesome. The MacBooks don't have that. I love seeing laptops with that. Even just one on here. Like I think it's so beneficial if you're plugging into a printer, a security key. There's a ton of things that still use USB type A, and you don't want to always have to have a dongle on hand. Next to that, unfortunately, we have a micro SD, so now I suddenly do need a dongle because a lot of my SD cards are full-size SDs, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat, unless you're exclusively filming with like a GoPro or a tiny camera. But again, we've kind of already established this is not really designed for creators. I think I'll talk about who it's designed for in a minute. Going to the other side, we have HDMI. Awesome, I love seeing full-size HDMI. And then 2 USB Type-C ports. These are both Thunderbolt ports, so you can charge with them. You can plug into a dongle, do a lot with those ports. But again, I don't know why Samsung didn't add another USB Type-C to the other side. The downside to that, to not having it on both sides, is what if you want to charge and the outlet's on your right side? You have to cross your lap with the cable and plug in on the left side. But speaking of charging, the charging cable in the box, I'm stoked. I love how tiny this thing is. Look at that. It's just like a little charging brick, and it disconnects from a very long USB Type-C cable, probably about 5 or 6 feet long. So that makes travel very easy. You can also plug in basically any device, your phone, to the same charging brick, making travel even easier. And speaking of power, the battery on here is claimed to be 25 hours on the 16-inch model, 21 hours on the 14-inch model. I think that's fantastic, but of course it's very dependent on what you're actually doing. For me, working, like, you know, typing up documents, watching videos, not really editing a video as much, like I didn't really push this too much. I think normal use, I was getting about 10 to 11 hours of battery, so nowhere near the 25 that they claimed for this. I'm not sure what settings I would have to be on or what kind of limitation I would need to get that. But of course, most of the reason for that longer battery life is the chip on here. So this is the Intel Ultra 7 chip. We have 16 gigs of RAM on here, and I'm not a big fan of Geekbench scores. If you want to know the Geekbench scores, like, you can Google those, other people do that. More of a practical test for me. Just working feels very fast. Most things you're doing, very, very smooth. Opening apps is very smooth. Editing videos is quite smooth. Exporting a video in 4K. I did a test comparing this to my 3.5-year-old M1 Max MacBook Pro. I got that in October 2021. And as you can see, the exporting is significantly faster on my older MacBook. Like, it's almost double the time to export on this. Again, it's an Intel Ultra 7. It's not a 9. It's not super optimized for Adobe, but all things considered, again, it's not really a laptop for creators. I think this is going to be more of a laptop for everyday users, students, people who are not really going to be pushing this to its limits, but you can push it, from time to time. It's just going to take a little bit longer to get things like that done. There are plenty of benefits to having this laptop, though, specifically in the Samsung ecosystem. So the Samsung Galaxy Book experience, I think, is nice. It's subtle in that it's not like really in your face. It's not something that, like, you could use this laptop and not have any other Samsung products and still have a great laptop. But if you have other Samsung products, whether they are Galaxy Buds, whether really a tablet and a phone are going to be the main benefits here, if you have a Galaxy S24 Ultra, you get a lot of really nice perks with this laptop in that kind of Samsung ecosystem, as you can see with these software options here. As far as the fan goes on here, usually one of my biggest complaints with many Windows laptops out there is the fan noise. This is shockingly quiet. Even when I'm exporting a video, it doesn't get particularly loud. So I think if I was filming like this and this was on, you probably wouldn't really hear it. Now, honestly, I think the speaker is better than I expected it because it's fairly well balanced. Like, you're getting a bit of bass in there. It feels like it's not the loudest speaker out there. That's kind of the limitation, which I'm not surprised because you don't have any upward firing speakers. Like, when you're looking at the laptop from the top, you really can't see the speakers at all. So, how slim this is, I think the speakers are definitely passable. The webcam, let's get into a webcam test. So this is the camera. I did not enable any beauty filters, but it really looks like it's doing a lot. Like, it's very much softening my face. It's adding, like, my eyes are like really sparkly. I feel like it changed my skin tone to be a little more like pale. It doesn't, I don't know. But I mean, as far as the camera goes, it seems to have decent brightness and resolution. It doesn't look super noisy. It looks a little bit, I mean, it's a webcam, of course, but I don't know, so far not too bad. Let's see what it looks like in other lighting environments. So this is a way tougher lighting environment. It's still really softening my face a lot. A lot of the same kind of beauty filters is what it looks like. But considering just how tiny this webcam is, like, I'll show you in some B-roll, it's absolutely microscopic. I have to say, I'm pretty impressed. And now, getting back to more of a personal note, using Windows, like, I've used Windows plenty of times in the past. I used to work as an engineer, and obviously, like, the whole company used Windows. That's really common. But since I've been using a Mac pretty exclusively for the past several years, with the exception of the occasional laptop test, I have to say, Windows is really quite nice now. There's a lot of stuff I really like about this. This one in particular comes with surprisingly minimal bloatware. A lot of times Windows laptops just load up the bloatware. This one, unless you're counting the Samsung apps, which there are a good number of them, but I feel like they're kind of a benefit to this. They make sense to be on there. The only bloatware app that I really saw on here was McAfee. It doesn't really give me a ton of pop-ups. I got one out of several days now, so not a big deal, and it's just easy to uninstall that. I wish that kind of crap wouldn't be on the more expensive laptops, but if it's gonna be there, at least it's nice that it doesn't have a ton of really intrusive pop-ups. As far as things I didn't particularly like about the experience, I did notice that my mouse like froze at one point for a little bit, but the touchscreen got me out of that, so it wasn't a problem. Also, when you first get the laptop, I had an update that took like over 30 minutes, so it took a little while to get this up and running. And also, Windows does some quirky things. Obviously, an operating system that's meant for so many different devices, has its quirks. But one is that every time I turn it off and on, it just re-enables numlock. If you use Windows laptops, I'm sure you're used to this. It's been happening with all my older Windows laptops, but I don't know, you just always have to toggle it back because you have a numpad there, so obviously you would want to use that. But without making this like a Mac versus Windows video, things that I really like about Windows, coming back to this laptop, I really love, the file management. I think Windows does a fantastic job of that. I think window management, application management just feels very intuitive, very smooth, and that kind of, for example, makes the taskbar feel so much more usable. Also, like File Explorer, I think is just way better than Mac Finder, especially for things like, showing recently used folders that maybe you've been working on throughout the day. Now, you may have noticed two letters I haven't said throughout this video are AI. And every laptop this year, really for the past 2 years, has been marketed so heavily as AI laptop, AI this. And a lot of times it's like, you probably don't really need that much AI in your laptop. You can just go to Google Chrome and open up ChatGPT and you're just fine. But there are some features on here that I was excited to try out that are really AI based. One of them is the equivalent to one of my favorite features on Android, which is circle to search. I was really excited to see that on here. So if we use that feature, you can see I could just click on that on the bottom, highlight anything I want on the screen, and it's going to search that, which in concept is amazing, just like it works on Android. But the downside here, and trust me, it really is a pretty big downside, is that this is based on Bing, not on Google. So the difference here is that it's almost never able to find anything relevant to what I am circling. So if I circle like this microphone from like Joe Rogan's podcast, it just shows me a bunch of microphones. And it's right, it is a microphone, but that doesn't help me to know what the microphone is. Whereas circle to search using Google, it'll almost definitely show me exactly what microphone that is. Aside from that, there are some other features that I like. Copilot is cool, but what this made me realize after really heavily using this laptop for a little while is, one, I'm very invested into my Mac, and it's going to take some time to get used to Windows, but I totally could. Windows and Mac, I think, are really quite equivalent in many ways. I really like using Windows a lot more than I did several years ago. The downsides, I think with this particular laptop, it's just not going to be able to keep up with my workload. You saw how long it took to export that video. So the conclusion, will this replace my Mac? I think this one in particular just isn't quite powerful enough to do that, but who is this laptop actually going to be for. We kind of established that it's not going to be for creators so much, but I think this is going to be a really solid laptop for anybody in the Samsung ecosystem looking for a much, like a very upper mid-range laptop or like lower premium laptop. It's an Intel Ultra 7, so you kind of know exactly what you're getting based on that processor. And I think that, you know, anyone who is using this for home use, for light gaming, maybe you are a student, that would be a really solid laptop choice there as well. And I would expect like longevity on this one. I mean, I can't say for certain, but it feels like a solid laptop. The hinge feels solid. I mean, I would really hope that this lasts a pretty decent amount of time. So let me know what you think about this laptop in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing. I have a lot of new videos coming out this month. I'm excited to launch them. Hopefully you're around to watch them. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in those next videos.